My parents left me nothing. Not the house. Not the company. Not even a single account. My cousin got everything. But then I found a blue ledger hidden inside my mother's study, and suddenly the inheritance didn't matter anymore. Because the numbers inside it pointed to a secret my parents had died trying to hide. And the person watching me knew exactly who I was. If you were in my position, would you open the ledger? Or walk away? Tell me in the comments and subscribe if you want to uncover the truth with me. The first thing Gideon Wren told me was that my parents had left me nothing. The second thing he told me was that my cousin had inherited everything. I remember the exact moment because the clock above his office door read 2:14 p.m., and I had been staring at it for almost a minute, waiting for him to correct himself. He never did. My name is Valentina Choi. I was 29, a forensic accountant in Chicago. I believed numbers were the one thing people could not manipulate without leaving a trace. I was wrong. My parents, Severin and Maribel Choi, had died 6 weeks earlier in a highway accident outside Milwaukee. I had expected grief. I had not expected to be erased. Across the polished walnut table, Gideon folded his hands over a leather folder. He was 60, silver-haired, and so careful with every word that I immediately disliked him. Beside me sat my cousin Octavia Venn. Now she wouldn't look at me. Gideon cleared his throat. Valentina, I know this is difficult. Then don't make me guess, I said. Just tell me. He opened the folder. Your parents' final will was signed 11 months ago. Fine. Your father appointed me executor. The primary beneficiary is Octavia Venn. My eyes moved to Octavia. She finally looked at me. I'm sorry. I turned back to Gideon. What about me? He hesitated. You were specifically excluded. The room became very quiet. I looked at the document. There it was in my father's signature. I intentionally make no provision for my daughter Valentina Choi. Octavia whispered, your father was upset with you. For what? I don't know. I studied her face. She looked nervous but not surprised. That bothered me more than the will. Gideon continued reading. The Winnetka residence goes to Octavia. The Evanston and Oak Park properties go to her. Choi Meridian Holdings goes to her, along with the investment accounts and personal collection. How much? Approximately $11.8 million. Octavia's face tightened. I never asked for this. But you signed it. I was told I had no choice. What does that mean? Nothing you need to concern yourself with today. I almost laughed. I had spent 8 years tracing financial fraud. That sentence made me more concerned. Then Gideon pushed a sealed envelope toward me. This was left separately. My mother's handwriting was on the front. Valentina. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet. Do not challenge the will. Find the blue ledger first. Trust no one who tells you why I left you nothing. I looked up. Gideon's expression had changed. Only slightly, but I noticed. What's a blue ledger? I don't know, he said. Too quickly. Octavia leaned forward. What did your mother write? I folded the paper. Nothing important. It was my first lie. At 3:05 p.m. I was outside the office. Chicago traffic moved past me. I was angry and numb. My phone rang. Octavia. I answered. Valentina, please don't do anything stupid. Such as going through your parents' house. I stopped walking. Why would you think I'd do that? Because you're you. The call ended. That was when I decided to go. My parents' house was in Winnetka, 40 minutes north of downtown, with the study my mother never allowed anyone to reorganize. I was standing at the front door when I tried my old key. It didn't work. I called Octavia. She answered immediately. You're there. How did you know? I have the security notifications. Then open the door. Silence. Valentina, go home. No. You don't understand. Then explain it. He didn't. 5 minutes later, the garage door opened. Octavia stood inside. You shouldn't be here. I was raised here too. She looked exhausted. Your mother told me never to let you into the study. My mother told you that? 2 days before she died. Why? I don't know. Then why follow her instructions? Octavia looked toward the house. Because your mother was scared. Of what? She didn't answer and walked inside. I followed. The house smelled as it had before the funeral. My mother's books were stacked beside the fireplace. My father's glasses remained on the counter. Nothing had been moved. Except the study. The desk drawers were open. The bookshelves had gaps. Someone had searched the room. I walked to the desk. When did this happen? Octavia said, I don't know. You own the house. I took possession this morning. Then who searched this room? I thought you did. I just arrived. Neither of us spoke. Then I noticed a small detail. One of the books on my mother's shelf was upside down. I pulled it free. Behind it was a narrow metal compartment. Octavia stepped forward. Valentina, wait. I opened it. Inside was a blue notebook. My pulse jumped. I opened the first page. My father's handwriting. Dates. Account numbers. Company names. Transfers. Then I saw two initials. OV, $480,000. Octavia went pale. That isn't mine. You're the beneficiary. I told you I didn't ask for the money. I turned another page. GW, $175,000. Gideon Wren. I looked at Octavia. She looked at the ledger. Then the house alarm began screaming. We froze. A voice came from downstairs. Don't move. It wasn't Gideon, a police officer, or anyone I recognized. Footsteps stopped outside the study. The doorknob began to turn. I tightened my grip on the blue ledger. And suddenly the inheritance meant nothing to me. Someone had spent $11.8 million making sure I believed my parents had rejected me. Now someone was willing to break into their house to keep me from learning why. The doorknob turned once, then stopped. Octavia grabbed my arm. Back door. I shoved the blue ledger inside my jacket and followed her through the bedroom. Someone hit the study door hard enough to shake the frame. Valentina. I recognized the voice. Rhett Sallow. Troy Meridian's operations manager. Why is Rhett here? I whispered. Octavia didn't answer. We crossed the upstairs hall and went through the laundry room. The rear stairs led into the garage. I reached for the side door, but Octavia stopped me. Wait. She pointed toward the driveway. A black SUV was parked behind my father's old sedan. Two men were standing beside it. One was Rhett. The other was a stranger. There's another way, Octavia said. She opened a narrow door beside the pantry. It led into a storage passage I hadn't seen since I was a child. We squeezed through. Behind us, the house erupted with footsteps. I kept one hand over the ledger. My mother had told me to find it, but not what to do next. We emerged behind the garage and ran across the garden. At the hedge, Octavia stopped. Don't go home. Where then? My office. No. If they're watching this house, they're watching you. He was right. We separated at the street. I drove south toward Chicago while Octavia took another car. At 6:12 p.m. I reached my apartment in Ravenswood. My colleague Nico Calder was waiting outside. He had worked beside me for 4 years and could usually tell when I was lying. Tonight, he said, what happened? I placed the blue ledger on his kitchen table. Tell me what you see. He opened it. These aren't inheritance transfers. I know. No. Look at the dates. He enlarged a page. The $480,000 transferred to OV wasn't one payment. It was 12 monthly transfers of $40,000. That's structured, he said. Why? To stay under internal reporting thresholds. And Gideon's payment? Nico checked the entry. $175,000. Different routing. Through what? A consulting company. He searched the name. His expression changed. What? This company doesn't have employees. Who owns it? An attorney's trust. Gideon. No. That's the problem. He turned the screen toward me. The registered owner was a Delaware company called Larkspur Civic Trust. I noticed another notation beside the name. Easy. My initials. What does that mean? Maybe your father created something for you. If he did, why would he leave me nothing? Nico closed the laptop. Maybe the will isn't the inheritance. An hour later I called Gideon. You knew about the blue ledger. I don't know what you're talking about. Someone broke into my parents' house. Were you there? Yes. Then contact the police. Why did my father pay your company? He hung up. 3 slow knocks sounded on my apartment door. Nico stood. Were you expecting anyone? No. I checked the hallway before opening the door. A small package sat on the floor. Inside was a photograph of my parents outside Union Station with an unfamiliar woman. On the back, ask about Mara Quill. Nico searched the name. Mara Quill had been compliance director at Choi Meridian Holdings. She had resigned 18 months earlier. Her record said she had moved overseas. There are no immigration records, Nico said. He searched again. Mara owned a house in Berwyn. The mortgage and taxes were current, but there was no record of her living there. At 9:47 p.m. my phone buzzed. You found the ledger. Good. Now stop looking. I typed, who are you? The answer came immediately. Someone your parents trusted. Mara Quill is alive. Then. Union Station. Platform 18. 6:40 a.m. Come alone. Nico shook his head. You're not going. I am. That's exactly what someone dangerous wants. I know. Then why? I looked at the ledger. Because they know my parents. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the blue ledger on my mother's desk and the stranger waiting beside the SUV. By dawn, I had stopped thinking about the inheritance and started thinking about the people who wanted the evidence hidden. At 5:50 a.m. I left my apartment. The city was still dark when I reached Union Station. At 6:37 I reached platform 18. A woman sat on a bench near the far end. Gray coat. Short dark hair. Black gloves. She stood when she saw me. Valentina Choi? Yes. My name is Mara Quill. She looked over my shoulder. Did anyone follow you? No. Are you sure? I checked. She nodded. Then she said, your parents didn't disinherit you. I know. No, Mara said. You don't. She handed me a folded document. It was my parents' original estate plan. My name was the primary beneficiary. Then why was the will changed? Because Gideon forced them to sign another one. Why? Because he discovered what your father had hidden. What? The Larkspur Civic Trust. What is it? Your parents didn't create it to hide money. Then what did they hide? Evidence. A train thundered into the station. Evidence that could destroy Gideon Wren. And Octavia? Mara hesitated. Your cousin is part of the reason your parents died. My stomach tightened. Then why was Octavia given everything? Because Gideon believed Octavia was working for him. Before I could respond, a man appeared at the end of the platform. Rhett Sallow. Mara saw him. Valentina, when I tell you to run, don't ask questions. Rhett started toward us. Mara grabbed my hand. Run. We moved. At the stairs my phone vibrated. Octavia. Valentina, don't trust Mara. She lied to your parents. I stopped. Mara noticed. What did you get? I showed her the message. She closed her eyes. Of course. What? Octavia finally chose a side. She looked toward Rhett. And now they know you're carrying the ledger. The message from Octavia stayed on my screen long after the train disappeared. Don't trust Mara. She lied to your parents. Mara watched my face. She contacted you? Yes. What exactly did she say? I showed her. Mara exhaled. Then we have less time than I thought. Who is we? She looked toward the station entrance. Your parents, me, and now you. Rhett was no longer on the platform. That frightened me more than seeing him. Where did he go? He doesn't need to chase us anymore. Why? Because he knows where you're going. We drove west through morning traffic. Mara took me to a small commercial building in Oak Park that had once belonged to Choi Meridian. Why are we here? Because Gideon doesn't know this place exists. Inside, Mara unlocked a basement office. This was your mother's backup office, she said. She never told me. She couldn't. Mara opened a cabinet. Your mother discovered something 6 months before the accident. He handed me a folder. Inside were copies of invoices from Choi Meridian. Warehouse maintenance, security equipment, consulting, legal services. Then I noticed the same vendor appearing under different names. Shell companies. Exactly. I turned another page. The companies all connected to the same bank account. The account belonged to Larkspur Civic Trust. My initials appeared again. Busy. I looked at Mara. Why would my parents put my initials on a criminal investigation? They didn't. She pointed to the bottom of the document. The notation had been added later. Different handwriting. Whose? Gideon's. My pulse quickened. Why? He wanted everyone to believe you were involved. I stared at the page. That would explain the will. Not completely. What else? Mara opened the second filing cabinet. Inside was a stack of medical records. My father's cardiac reports. My mother's blood tests. Their final hospital records. One page had a handwritten note. Brake failure confirmed. I looked at Mara. Who wrote this? Your mother. Then the crash wasn't an accident. No. The room seemed suddenly smaller. Mara placed another file on the desk. It contained photographs from the night of the accident. A damaged vehicle. A highway barrier. A tow truck. And one photograph of a man standing behind the police line. Rhett Sallow. I felt sick. He was there. He arrived 23 minutes before emergency services. Why? He claimed he was responding to a company vehicle alert. But my parents weren't driving a company vehicle. Exactly. I sat down. Mara continued. Rhett was stealing from Troy Meridian. Your father found out. Your mother confronted him. And Gideon? Gideon knew. Why protect him? Because Rhett had access to the warehouse records. She opened another folder. Your father was building a case against both of them. I stared at the documents. For the first time the story had a shape. My parents weren't victims of a family dispute. They had been investigating fraud inside their own company. Then they died. The will changed. Octavia inherited everything. I was erased. And Gideon was positioned to control the estate. But something still didn't fit. If Gideon wanted the company, why give it to Octavia? Mara looked at me. Because Octavia was supposed to sell it. To whom? Mara didn't answer. My phone rang. Octavia. I answered. Where are you? Does it matter? Yes. Why? Because Rhett is at my apartment. I froze. What? He has 2 men with him. Call the police. I did. Then leave. I can't. Why? Because they're not looking for me. Her voice dropped. They're looking for the blue ledger. I looked at Mara. Octavia continued. Valentina, listen carefully. I lied to you yesterday. What did you lie about? I said I didn't know why your mother was afraid. You did know. Yes. What did she tell you? She told me that if anything happened to them, I had to make sure you never found the ledger. My stomach dropped. You were protecting it? No. Then what? I was protecting you from what was written inside. The call ended. I stared at the phone. Mara said nothing. Tell me she's lying. She isn't. What is in that ledger? Mara walked to the computer. Your father kept records of every transfer made through the Larkspur Trust. Financial evidence. Not only financial evidence. She turned on the computer. A single encrypted folder appeared. That was my name. Valentina Choi. Final disclosure. I stared at it. How do we open it? We don't. Why? Your parents designed it to open only after the will was executed. I remembered Gideon's office. The sealed envelope. The will. The ledger. All 3 had been connected. Mara inserted a small drive into the computer. The screen asked for a password. I tried my birthday. Wrong. My mother's birthday. Wrong. My father's. Wrong. Then I remembered something from childhood. My father used to make me solve accounting puzzles. When I got an answer right, he would say the same sentence. Numbers don't lie. People do. I typed. Number instantly. The screen unlocked. There was one video file. I clicked it. My father's face appeared. He looked older than I remembered. Valentina, he said, if you're seeing this, then Gideon has already told you that we left you nothing. I couldn't breathe. My father continued. That statement is a lie. The video cut to my mother. She was sitting beside him. You need to understand something before you investigate anyone. She looked directly into the camera. Octavia did not betray us. I stared at Mara. My mother continued. She saved your life. Then the video ended. I heard footsteps above us. Mara turned toward the basement door. Someone was coming down the stairs. She whispered, we need to leave. I stood. The door opened. Octavia stepped into the basement. Her clothes were torn. There was blood on her sleeve. And she was holding a document with Gideon Wren's signature. "Valentina," she said, breathing hard. "I finally found out why your parents gave me everything." She placed the document on the desk. "They didn't give me the estate. They gave me the trap." The document on the desk carried Gideon Wren's signature, but the sentence beneath it was what made me stop breathing. "Transfer all controlling interests in Choi Meridian Holdings to Octavia Venn upon execution of the estate." Octavia looked at me. "It sounds like an inheritance," she said. It wasn't. Mara locked the basement door. "Tell her everything." Octavia wiped the blood from her sleeve. "I tried to get the original corporate files before Gideon did. Rhett found me first." "What happened?" "He hit me. I got away." I looked at the document again. "Why would my parents make you the owner?" "Because Gideon couldn't take the company directly." "Then why make me believe they left me nothing?" Octavia swallowed. "Because he was watching the will." That answer changed the room. She explained that Gideon had access to every estate document before it became public. If my parents left me anything, he could immediately move against me. If Octavia received everything, he would assume she was his intended partner. "He wanted you to challenge the will," she said. "So he could use the court process to freeze the estate and force the company into a sale." Mara nodded. "And he already had a buyer." "Who?" Octavia looked at me. "Rhett. The operations manager?" "He wasn't acting alone." She opened another file. The buyer was a private investment company called Northstar Industrial Partners. Its registered director was Calder Voss. Mara knew the name. Calder Voss funded half the Meridian Circle. Then why hasn't anyone arrested him? Because no one has connected him to the company. I studied the documents. There were payments from Gideon to Northstar, payments from Northstar to Rhett, and payments from Choi Meridian to a chain of shell companies. The pattern was clear. They weren't stealing the company one transaction at a time. They were preparing to make it look worthless. Once the estate was divided, I said, Rhett could manufacture losses. "Exactly," Mara said. "Then Northstar buys the damaged company cheaply." Octavia nodded. "And Gideon collects his fee." I turned toward her. "How did my parents know?" "Your mother found the first transfer." "When?" 11 months ago. The same month the will had been signed. Everything had happened almost simultaneously. My parents discovered the fraud. They created the trust. They changed the will. They transferred control to Octavia. Then they died. But one question remained. Why didn't they tell me? Octavia looked down. "Because Gideon had someone inside your workplace." I felt a chill. "Who?" "We don't know," Mara said. "But we know what happened after your parents began investigating." She placed a printed email on the desk. It had been sent from an internal Choi Meridian account to my work email. The message was simple. "Valentina is reviewing the vendor accounts. Remove her access." I stared at the sender. My employee ID was listed in the header. "I never sent this." "No," Mara said. "Someone used your credentials." "When?" 3 weeks before the accident. That explained something I had ignored. My supervisor had suddenly removed me from a major audit and claimed there was a conflict of interest. I had assumed it was routine. It wasn't. Someone had deliberately made it appear that I was investigating my own family's finances. And if that information reached Gideon, he could portray me as compromised. My phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "You have 1 hour to surrender the ledger." Then another. "After that, Octavia becomes the problem." I showed them. Octavia stood. "We need to move." "The restaurant." "My parents' restaurant?" "Your father built a second archive beneath it." I had never heard of it. 20 minutes later we drove to Evanston. The restaurant had been closed since the funeral. Dust covered the front counter and chairs were stacked against the walls. Octavia unlocked the basement. Behind a wine rack was a steel door. Inside was a narrow room with filing cabinets and an old desktop computer. I found employee records, property contracts, and bank statements. Then I found a box marked Q17. Inside was a photograph of Gideon standing with Calder Voss. The date was 2 years earlier. Beside them stood Rhett. My father had written 3 words on the back. "They know everything." I turned the photograph over. There was another image beneath it. This one showed my parents with a fourth person. A woman. I recognized her immediately. She was the same woman from the photograph I had received the night before. Maura Quill. But Maura had told me she had joined my parents only after discovering the fraud. The date on the photograph was 5 years earlier. I looked at her. You lied. Maura didn't deny it. I met your parents before I worked for the company. For how long? 7 years. What were you doing? I was investigating Calder Voss. On whose behalf? He looked at Octavia. Your father's. That wasn't the answer I expected. Maura explained that Severin had hired her privately after discovering suspicious acquisitions tied to North Star. She had infiltrated the company as a compliance director and had been gathering evidence for years. Then she found something much worse. Calder wasn't trying to steal Choi Meridian, she said. Then what? He wanted your father's logistics network. Why? Because it was moving something. What? Maura opened the final cabinet. Inside was a list of shipment numbers. No product descriptions. Only dates, destinations, and container codes. My forensic instincts immediately noticed something. The same container numbers appeared in 3 different companies. I grabbed a calculator. They were duplicating shipment records. Yes. Why? Maura's face tightened. Because the legitimate cargo was being used to hide illegal transfers. Money. No. She paused. People. The word hit harder than I expected. Octavia stepped back. My parents knew? Your uncle discovered it first, Maura said. And that's why they were killed? We don't know who ordered the accident. I looked at the records. Then why is Gideon involved? Because Gideon handled the legal contracts. I understood the scale now. The inheritance was never just about money. The estate had been. The first thing I noticed about Nico was that he was not afraid. His lip was split, his wrists were tied, but he looked directly at me. Don't give him anything, he said. You always were loyal, Nico. Not to you. Calder Voss stood behind him in a dark coat. Rhett waited near the loading doors. You have the ledger, Gideon said. Give it to me. No. His smile vanished. You don't understand your situation. I understand enough. I pointed at Nico. If you wanted the ledger, you wouldn't need him. Gideon looked pleased. Good. You're finally thinking. Calder stepped forward. Your parents discovered something 5 years ago. Shipment records connected several legitimate companies to an illegal transport network. People, I said. His expression tightened. Yes. Nico looked at me. Valentina, that's only half of it. Gideon struck him across the face. Enough. Gideon explained that my parents had discovered illegal shipments moving through warehouses owned by several companies. Choi Meridian had unknowingly handled some legitimate logistics. When Severin found the pattern, he confronted Calder. Then he went to Gideon. That had been his mistake. You were supposed to protect him, I said. I was supposed to protect my client. You sold him out. I gave him choices. Silence or consequences? He nodded. My mother had refused to stay silent. My father had continued collecting evidence. Then they created Larkspur Civic Trust. But they had not stored everything together. The blue ledger contained financial records. Maura had compliance files. The shipment numbers were hidden inside company archives. And I had the skills to connect them. That was why Gideon had spent months making me look financially compromised. You wanted me to look guilty. Yes. So if I challenged the will, you'd use my investigation against me. Yes. And Octavia? Gideon glanced at her. Octavia was useful. She stepped forward. You lied to me. I gave you $11 million. You gave me a target on my back. You accepted it. Because your people threatened my family. Calder finally spoke. Your family was already involved. Octavia stared at him. My father. Crispin Venn knew about the network. My father died 12 years ago. He knew enough to become inconvenient. Octavia went silent. I realized she had never been told the full truth. Gideon looked at me. Now give me the ledger. I reached inside my jacket. Nico shook his head. I pulled out the blue ledger. Gideon stepped closer. Then I dropped it into the drainage channel beside my shoe. His face hardened. Get it? Rhett moved toward the channel. Nico smiled. Gideon stopped. The ledger was a decoy. 2 days earlier, Nico and I had scanned every page. The real evidence was already stored elsewhere. Where are the copies? Gideon demanded. Everywhere. Calder pulled a gun. Octavia stepped in front of me. Don't. Then the warehouse doors opened. Police flooded inside. Gideon stared at me. You called them? No. His expression changed. Mara raised her phone. I did. Mara had already alerted federal investigators. By the time the officers entered, copies of the evidence were secured. Gideon, Calder, and Rhett were taken into custody. Gideon remained still. Then he looked at me. You think this ends here? No. You have no idea what you've uncovered. I know enough. He smiled. That is why you should be afraid. The investigation expanded over the following days. Shipment records connected shell companies in 3 states. Financial records showed payments to intermediaries. Several names were hidden behind layers of corporations. Rhett admitted tampering with my parents' vehicle. He claimed he had acted alone. Amara didn't believe him. Neither did I. A week later, she called me to her office. There is something strange about the crash. She placed photographs on the table. The brake system was tampered with. I know. But the method wasn't consistent with Rhett's equipment. So someone else modified it? Possibly. My stomach tightened. Who? We don't know. Then she placed another document beside the photographs. A payment had been made to a private investigator 3 days after the crash. The client was hidden behind an attorney trust. The routing account was Larkspur Civic Trust. The recipient was Mara Quill. I left the office and found Mara outside. You took money from the trust. Yes. For what? To find who ordered the second modification. You knew. I suspected. Then why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know if the person responsible was still watching you. Who were you investigating? Mara looked toward the street. Your parents' private driver. My father didn't have a private driver. He did. He handed me a photograph. A man stood beside my parents' car. I recognized him. He had been at the funeral. He had stood behind Octavia. I had never asked his name. Dorian Vale, Mara said. Where is he now? Her expression changed. He works for you. I stared at her. That isn't possible. He has been your driver since the funeral. My stomach dropped. I remembered the man who had offered to drive me home from the cemetery. The man who always seemed to know where I was going. My phone rang. Dorian. I answered. Miss Choi, I believe you have just learned my name. I said nothing. Please don't go back to your apartment. Why? Because someone is waiting there. The call ended. A photograph arrived seconds later. My apartment door. Beneath it was a message. You have the wrong enemy. I looked at Mara. Then I looked at the photograph again. Gideon was in custody. Rhett was in custody. Calder was in custody. Yet someone was still watching me. And Dorian had been close to my family before the crash. I suddenly understood the most dangerous part of my parents' plan. They had never expected me to uncover the truth in one straight line. They had built a trail of false answers, knowing the right enemy might be hidden behind the wrong one. At 10:16 that night, I returned to the federal office instead of my apartment. Amar was still working. I placed Dorian's photograph on her desk. Find him. He studied it. Do you know where he lives? No. Then we start with his employment records. She turned to her computer. 5 minutes later, she stopped typing. Valentina. What? This man doesn't exist under the name Dorian Vale. I stared at her. Then who is he? Amara opened a second database. A driver's license appeared. The cemetery was almost empty when I arrived. Octavia stood beside our parents' graves with her hands inside the pockets of a dark coat. She looked smaller than she had at the lawyer's office 6 weeks earlier. I parked behind her and walked toward the graves. You said you finally know who Dorian is. She nodded. His real name is Elias Venn. Your brother. Yes. You told me you were an only child. I lied. I stopped a few feet from her. Why? Because I was told he was dead. Who told you? Pie mother. The answer made everything more complicated. Octavia looked at the graves. Elias was 11 when he disappeared. My mother said he had been sent away after an incident with my father. What incident? He found documents. What documents? Records connected to Crispin. Her voice shook. My father wasn't just involved with the Meridian Circle. He had been helping them move assets through transportation companies. Elias discovered it. I remembered the warehouse records. So Elias knew about the network as a child? He knew enough to be dangerous. What happened to him? My mother said he died. But he didn't. No. Who was Dorian Vale? A name Gideon gave him. I stared at her. Why would Gideon hide your brother? Because Elias was a witness. To what? Octavia reached into her coat and pulled out a photograph. It showed a younger Elias standing beside my father. On the back was a date. 6 months before my parents died. He came back, Octavia said. And my father knew? Yes. Did my mother know? Yes. Then why did they let him near me? They didn't. I looked at her. What do you mean? Dorian was assigned to protect you without your knowledge. I thought about every ride from the cemetery, every time the same car appeared outside my office. Every evening I noticed someone waiting near my building. He wasn't watching me for Gideon. No. He was watching me for my parents. Yes. A strange relief came over me. Then Octavia ruined it. But that wasn't his only reason. What else? He was looking for something your father hid. What? I don't know. A car passed outside the cemetery gates. Octavia watched it until it disappeared. Elias contacted me 3 days after the funeral. You knew he was alive? Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because he told me not to. And you trusted him? He saved my life. I waited. She finally explained. After our parents died, Gideon had sent people to pressure Octavia into signing additional documents. She refused. 2 men followed her from the bank. Elias intervened. He didn't kill anyone. He simply made it clear that Octavia was no longer an easy target. He told me to accept the inheritance, she said. Why? Because the estate contained something Gideon wanted. The company? No. The Blue Ledger? No. Then what? Octavia looked at the graves. Your mother's private trust. I felt the same frustration I had felt in Gideon's office. Another secret. Another locked door. How do we access it? You don't. Why? Because the trust isn't controlled by a person. She handed me another document. It was a certificate for a storage facility in Indiana. My father's signature appeared at the bottom. What's there? Something Elias believes your father left behind. And you? I think it is the reason your parents died. We drove to Indiana that afternoon. The storage facility stood outside Fort Wayne, surrounded by low industrial buildings and empty lots. The manager checked the certificate. You're authorized. He gave me a key. Unit 214 was at the end of a long corridor. Inside were 6 boxes. No money. No jewelry. No property deeds. Just notebooks, photographs, old computers, and a locked metal case. I opened the first box. It contained photographs of Troy Meridian employees. The second held bank statements. The third contained copies of legal contracts. The fourth was filled with photographs of shipping containers. The fifth contained personal letters. The sixth had only one envelope. My name was written on it. I opened it. My father's handwriting. Valentina, if you found this, then Elias has returned. I looked at Octavia. She looked stunned. I continued reading. He will tell you that he is protecting you. He is. I turned the page. But he will not tell you why. My hands tightened. The next line was worse. Your cousin knows more than she has admitted. Octavia closed her eyes. I looked at her. How much? I don't know. Don't lie to me again. He swallowed. My father wasn't the only person who worked with Gideon. Who else? Pie mother. The room went silent. Your mother was part of the Meridian Circle? Not at first. What changed? She became involved after Elias disappeared. Why? To find him. And did she? Octavia nodded. She found him. When? 3 years later. I stared at her. Then why did she say he was dead? Because Gideon threatened her. What did he threaten? He had evidence that she had helped move money through a foundation. I looked down at my father's letter. The family secrets kept expanding. My parents had investigated the network. Crispin had worked for it. Octavia's mother had been pulled into it. Elias had become a witness. Gideon had manipulated all of them. But none of that explained the accident. I opened the final page. My father's handwriting became less controlled. Valentina, there is one fact you must know. Gideon did not order the crash. I stopped. Octavia leaned closer. Keep reading. He believed he did. I looked up. What does that mean? Octavia shook her head. I don't know. I read the final paragraph. The person who caused the crash wanted Gideon to believe it was his operation. That person needed us dead but needed Gideon distracted. My pulse accelerated. Why? The last sentence answered it. Because the real target was never our company. I stared at the page. Then what was the target? Neither of us spoke. A sound came from outside the storage unit. Footsteps. Slow. Approaching. Octavia locked the door. Someone followed us. I switched off the light. The footsteps stopped. Then came 3 knocks. I recognized the rhythm. 3 short knocks. The same sound from my